Check.
Mic check, mic check,
check.
mic check.
Check.
Check, Mike. Check, Mike.
I suppose I can go like this.
Hi, this is Larry with Guys, Games, and Beer, and we're still at GameHole Con 2024, 2022. That's a way to start things out, huh? Good thing we edit. No, we don't edit. So, but I am with...
Hello, my name is Michael Wirt, also known as the History Prof. I am a history professor, that's my name, and I'm also tonight with Guys, Games, and Beer, and I will pass this off to...
Hi, I am Christopher Rick. I'm with Guys, Games, and Beer and Midwest Gaming Classic and a whole bunch of other stuff that we're not going to get into because we're super interested in our guest today, which is none other than...
Hi, I'm Zeb Cook, and I'm here with Guys, Games, and Beer. And, hey, yeah, they've got questions. I have no idea what they're going to ask.
I have question number one. Can I do question number one?
Sure.
Breathe deeply.
I have goosebumps right now. You don't even know. Did you ever think there would be 40 million people playing Dungeons and Dragons at the same time in the world?
Not a damn chance.
I know, right?
It's great. It's wonderful.
Okay. Okay, so to back up slightly, because there may be
That's a very pressing question.
there may be people that are much younger than us out there, and so tell us what you've done.
Start from the beginning.
Well, most of what I did a long time ago. I worked at TSR for 15 years, started in '79, designed the expert set, wrote the AD&D second edition, Oriental Adventures. I've had to answer this question a couple of times here because people look at me like, you have a badge and what did you do?
Your name is what?
And designed the Planescape setting, wrote the Conan role-playing game, wrote the Indiana Jones role-playing game. That was interesting. And yeah, a bunch of other stuff that I can't even remember.
All right, so basically, can we say like a godfather of D&D?
Something like that. I don't know about that.
Stepfather of my childhood.
I was going to say, Larry, your childhood too.
My childhood too. I played second edition
Absolutely.
when I was a young man. So yes,
I
had the Oriental edition. Yes,
I'm going to jump in with the nerdy question. As a history professor, someone who publishes and researches on Japanese and East Asian history in particular, I remember when I was a young lad playing Oriental Adventures, and in those days there wasn't a lot in English that was public-facing, that was about Asia in general. So I'd like to know a little bit about how that research process worked for you, and especially in the days before the internet, when there wasn't a lot in English on Asian history.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot, and a lot of it was very, very scholarly kind of stuff. Plus, a lot of bad and good Japanese movies mostly. Really wasn't a lot of stuff that was Chinese. There was a lot of Chinese fantasy stuff, and one of the things we had that I actually did at our house was Bad Movie Night, and we had some very good people at finding really kind of obscure and odd movies. And so that included a lot of the Chinese hopping vampire stuff and these sorts of things. I love Japanese and Asian stuff in general, and so yeah, a lot of what's research. I read like books on the social structures of the Sung Dynasty. I mean, my God, it was the most boring stuff to read for me.
Super fascinating to Michael over there, I'm sure.
But at the same time, it was kind of interesting. Or what were the things that were shipped by caravans from Samarkand, or these sorts of things. And then a lot of Japanese books and the same sort of stuff. It was really hard to, it was the stuff that was really hard to find was reliable folklore information. Right. And it was especially hard for Chinese as opposed to Japanese. It was more Japanese stuff. And then you read authors from time period and this sort of thing. And yeah. Penguin Books was our friend.
Oh yeah, yeah. And at that time, there probably wasn't a lot on South Asia or Southeast Asia either.
Not
in English,
very, very
right?
little on
Yeah,
Southeast Asia.
right,
That was
right.
probably the single hardest area to get information on.
Right, yeah. No, it certainly reflects. I mean, you guys did a great job on that, reflecting on what was available at the time. I thought was really good.
Well, thank you.
Well,
So-
so, like, what was? You know, you're writing for and creating a world in fantasy, but it sounds like you did a lot of research on like what was actual. So what was the balance there of, oh, well, this is fantasy, so it doesn't really matter, and you know, it's our world.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly the biggest balance is this fun? You know, would this be fun? So you throw out a lot of stuff that's like, okay, that's just a pain in the ass, and we're not going to worry about that. I mean, and frankly, I liked the history probably a little too much, and so a little too much history gets in there, as opposed to I should have just like maybe been, yeah, let's just be more fantasy about it. But you know, that was always kind of my downfall in some ways.
Right.
But it was fun to do. It made it fun to do.
To walk it back a step, what were you doing before TSR? What's that first step that you make, before your role-playing game designer days to this moment?
I was an English teacher for 2 years.
Let's see. This was high
That
school
was about
English?
as long as I was able to last in that.
Yeah, high school English?
I was the entire high school English department.
Where was this again? What state were you in?
This was in Nebraska. It was in a very, very small town.
Wow.
So, you know, kind of how those things work.
And what was that connection? How does one go from being a, small town Nebraskan English teacher to now you're...
Well, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons all through college, when it first came out, this sort of stuff, and played war games and stuff before that. I was always big into games. And so when we're living in Nebraska in this town of 300 people, the only thing you've got to entertain yourself is to kind of do the one-on-one and solo kind of
Right.
And so in doing that, Dragon Magazine came out with an ad listing that they were looking for potential designers, and basically I got encouraged by my wife to go ahead and give it a try, and to my amazement, they said yes.
Ooh, that's a great segue into the question I have, which is, what did you submit?
Well,
And can we still find it?
Would you submit it
yeah,
now?
actually, you can find part of what I submitted. That's for sure. A lot of it was they sent a batch of questions that they wanted you to give answers to, and I think they didn't know what they were looking. They'd never hired designers really either,
Right.
and so the questions were like, identify these obscure pole arms, and all this sort of stuff. But most important, as part of that was. Send a writing sample.
Yeah.
And so wrote something up. It was if I looked at it today, I'd be appalled, I'm sure. And it was pitifully short, but it was enough to get me accepted. And that writing sample basically got expanded into a full module, which was the Dwellers of the Forbidden City.
Okay, yeah, right.
It's like, take that, and because I had a little dungeon that I had sent in, and turn it into a whole setting thing.
Did you have a favorite module that you were like, oh, this one, oh, man, I can't believe I wrote that. That was so good.
Oh, wow. That's the modules are tough because a lot of them are written, you wrote them very quickly. I did a number that were really bad ideas that were fun in a way. I think certainly Dwellers Forbidden City and the A series, the first of the A series, Slave Pits.
Right.
Because frankly, the reason that those I really liked is because that's where we were really kind of first learning how to do stuff. And then later on, modules became more like, okay, yeah, we know how to do this. And so it was less of that adventure of discovery. Yeah.
And so about what age are we talking about when you make that move, send in the
I
sample?
think I was about 24 or so at that point.
Wow.
I have a layout from then of like this is how a module is laid out at TSR, and it was like everything is 16 pages. How do you cram like images and maps and all the text that I have problems doing it, and then sometimes I'm like, I only need 8. But for the good ones, they're never just 8 pages. How do you fit that all into 16 pages?
Well, the 16-page formula was because that's the way the printing presses were. They would a
Well
sheet
aware.
would be 16 pages. So, everything was in some multiple of 16. And generally, we knew roughly how many words that would be. And then art-wise, you had a budget that they said you could have X amount of art pieces. You get 2 half-pagers, you got a couple of quarter-pagers, and this sort of stuff. And so, you just kind of wrote to fit. And sometimes the difficulty was trying to write enough to fill the whole 1632 or 64 pages of material, because it was work.
So, did you, on a module you were working on, did you decide what element is to be the illustrations? Like, maybe you didn't do the illustration, I'm saying, but
No,
you
didn't
go,
do the
no, I want
illustrations.
the
God, no.
lizard man in this illustrated.
Yeah,
you
what
know?
we would do is we would put together, what was called an art order, where we would kind of call out, I want an illustration roughly around here, and the writer and the editor, designer and the editor would kind of work on an art order where you would write a description of, kind of what the picture was supposed to be, and these were often the bane of the artist's existence, because it's really easy to write a bad art order. It's like, I want 87 guys in this picture doing all that, and they'll go like, oh God, no, I'm going to give you 1, and then so you kind of had to learn the art of writing just enough so they had an idea what it is you were looking for, but not so much that you were trying to tell them what to draw. Exactly, because if you told them what to draw exactly, they either did that and it looked horrible, and it was your fault basically, or they just ignored it and did whatever they wanted.
Wow. And so the Planescape setting, yes?
Oh yeah,
yes.
Planescape. That is one of my favorites by far.
And when you were working on that, did you have a sense of, wow, this is really, we're doing something drastically different, or was this just, this is just yet another setting we're working on, or?
No, we were trying to do something that we felt was not like what we had done before. That was part of it. We had some instructions from our creative, the head of our creative department, Jim Ward, and we wanted something that had kind of that strong faction identity kind of thing. We wanted, and it's the planes that for me that meant it's got to be weird and stuff. And then I basically just kind of went a bit mad, and I decided, I did things like pick out typefaces and say, we should use this typeface and this sort of stuff. And the graphic designers were very happy because they got to actually do real graphic designing as opposed to just like, here's another straight layout kind of a thing. And so, it was a lot of people getting to kind of really flex and made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a visually striking product, right? Not just the content, but the artwork and the text and how it sits together. Yeah, it's amazing.
And the content, because I just used it, 3 weeks ago in a Twitch stream where I was like, hold on, let me lean over. Manual of the Planes? No. Planescape? Sure.
Yeah.
Like, I still, to this day, I hand wave the stats, but I use the stuff, the content in it.
Yeah, I think it was more about ideas and stuff than actual, like, this is a completely playable world.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun to put together. And part of it, when you're saying the visually, part of it was because early and when we were just getting started in the process, Dana Knutson was assigned for like a month to basically do nothing but sketch up things, work out. So we worked, we worked out the architecture, a whole lot of the faction symbols, and then he came up with this symbol that was like, oh, that's too good. We got to use that for something, and that became the Lady of Pain because we really didn't really have that character until that image showed up, and it was like, yeah, we got to do something with that.
That brings like a great inspiration question. Like, is it often that happens where somebody sketches something, you're like, whoa, we have to use that, and that's the idea? Or is it mostly like, I have this idea, and then it gets sketched out or something in that?
Most of the time it happens the second way because in most of the products, the art doesn't really begin until after the writing is done, or mostly done. But with a couple of products, they like starting with like Dark Sun, they said, okay, we're going to assign an artist to this and really work out kind of the visual, and at the same time as they were working out the design. And so then the two started to feed on each other, and then we got to do that with Planescape, and I think they may have done that with some other ones since that point too.
So if you do much writing today, have you put anything out?
Well, I am gleefully retired at the moment. I mean, I'm gleeful because it's still a new experience for me, and so at this point I'm trying to keep my workload light.
Little gardening in between.
Oh yeah,
people coming in saying we need you to
little
write
carpentry.
But do you get a lot of requests nonetheless? Like, could you write this little thing
I
or consult
have
on
some
this?
things that I have been doing, or and I suspect as this whole retirement thing goes on, I will get bored, and kind of get back into doing more writing.
Right.
Can we talk about the character design for the races in Star Frontiers? Like, it was. I was just saying earlier, like, it was the first time that in a game, like, you had an alien that was in 3 dimensions stable, because everything is humanoid, and humanoid is generally not, you can shove a humanoid over pretty easily.
Well, we never addressed we want to make guys that are physically stable. But one of the things we did want to do, Lawrence and I wanted to do when we were doing the Star Frontier stuff, was we wanted aliens that felt alien, that they weren't just guys in suits kind of a thing. And so we indulged in some, like, let's do some cheerfully bizarre things and stuff, and then tried to kind of round them out a little bit more, so they were more than just like it's elves in space or anything like that. And so we wound up with some entertaining guys.
I just recently got the box set of miniatures from Star Frontiers, like, I was ecstatic. Like, they showed up and they were horribly painted. I'm like, I don't care. They're beautiful. They're so beautiful, because they were like the first truly alien, like you said, they're truly alien races to play in a game at that time.
So how are you enjoying this con?
Absolutely, I always enjoy GameHole. I like coming here. Alex runs and his team run a great con, and
The best.
We do a lot of cons.
It's very game centric.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Are there any other cons that you frequent consistently?
I try to go to GaryCon. It's been the last couple of years. It's been a bit bumpy for all cons, obviously.
That's right. Yeah.
And the other one I'll go to is NTRPG, the North Texas RPG Con.
I often hear
because
it's a good one.
these are all very kind of like North Texas is very laid back and it's kind of small, and that's really nice. GaryCon is full of lots of people I know and old friends, and it's a great chance to get together. And that's a little bit same here. There's a lot of people I know, and it's, places I used to live.
Excellent.
All right, guys, don't dead air. Keep it going.
Yeah.
So is there anything, as you look at gaming as it has changed over the decades, something that you look at role-playing games now and think, oh, that would have been nice to have back then, or this is a trend that I really appreciate now that we didn't have back then?
The trend that I appreciate now is more the trend to kind of going back to the style of gaming that I was more in line with in second edition, which is a bit looser on the rules,
Right.
a little bit more about, hey, it's the story, it's the and that sort of stuff. during 3.5 and stuff, there were too many rules mechanics for
Absolutely,
me.
right.
It was just too much for what I wanted to do. So I actually wound up playing lots of like simpler role-playing games simply because I could focus more on the improvisation and all that sort of stuff. And if somebody said, "Oh, you can't do that because this is in the book," you could say, "No, it's not, because there's no rule for it."
Right.
Well, and there was that period of time, the collector card game,
Yeah.
which was not a replacement for tabletopping, and it's good to see that kind of back.
Well, I mean, there's enough space for all of these games, and it's enough space for you. Everybody can, you don't have to enjoy just one type. There's a thing, and so, people are like, "Oh God, I never play those things," because they're missing out on sometimes they're missing out on
Right.
opportunities.
Right.
I play miniatures war games. I play historical war games. I play role-playing games. I play board games. I'm not real good on sports games.
right.
If you just rolled dice in the sports games, we'd all be great or terrible. It depends on the dice.
Yeah, so that leads to another excellent point, which is in your own free time now that you might have a little bit more of, since you're semi-retired, we can say,
Yeah.
or retired, yeah. Do you still get a lot of time to play games, and what kind of games do you play?
I play a lot of miniatures games right at the moment.
Interesting.
I did have, before I could be a really active group that would meet a couple of times a month, and that was good. And I also play, pulp games. I don't really, at this point, don't play a lot of role-playing games because of the difficulty of just getting a group together and kind of keeping it together.
Right.
And so, plus, after a long time, I kind of got a little burned out on them.
Yeah.
But I'm getting better, and I'm getting back to them.
You mentioned board games. You got a favorite board game?
Lately, what am I playing for a favorite board game? Great Fire of London, which is a game very few people have heard about, but it's actually a really well put together little game, and it's not new or anything. I'm not a real big fan of the board games that have 10 billion pieces and 18 different placemat things and all that sort of stuff. I like them a little bit simpler and more straightforward. So that's sort of stuff. There are a couple out there that I've been looking at, like, oh yeah, I think I want to look and check that out. But it's fairly simple.
Right. Now, in some of your TSR products, was there, not everything makes it into the thing. All the things that you write, they don't all make it into the final product. Is there something that you can remember that you really loved and it didn't make it in? Maybe something that the audience doesn't know about, a race, a character, a faction, a theme, a place that got cut and you really wish it didn't get cut?
Wow, that's not a question anybody's really ever asked me, and so I don't have a quick answer for it. One of the things is, because we were writing so much, you tended not to waste too much. It was like, all right, I got to get this. I got to write 128 pages, and so just getting it all filled was a challenge. So you tended not to throw out things too much. It was more, you either self-edited and said, yeah, I'm just never going to get to that, so we'll move. We won't even bother to include that. Or it was like, oh my God, I have to figure out how to fill 5 more pages in this book.
Where's the art department?
Yeah, they hated you. They hated me on that. It's like, no, we're already, because it was work for them.
Right.
So I have a hard time thinking of things that we just kind of cut because of space. That was tended to be fairly rare, and it's a real pain, because when you just start cutting things for space, then you have to kind of go through and make sure all the things that are left are still coherent.
Right, the continuity editing, right? Yeah.
Nothing references the missing paragraph.
That's right.
The ghost paragraph.
Together and that sort of thing.
Where did this come from?
It says page 12, and there's nothing on page 12 about
Right.
this.
Well, that happened with some of the first edition AD&D books.
This
There would be
reference is
references.
table 37.
Yeah, right.
There's no table 37.
That's right.
That's the one you make up on the fly. And that's how improv became it's so central, I think.
That's right. So there was no thread or no setting or no idea that you thought, I wish I could have explored that, but didn't have the time or the space.
Oh, we had lots of settings that we
Right.
wanted. The bigger problem there was those would get filled. Those would be like, I'd really like to do this, and then they would just never happen because they just never made it onto the schedule.
Right.
Never did a steampunk setting. We could never figure out how to do a steampunk setting that would really not be a real niche kind of product.
Interesting.
And that was a problem. There were a lot of cool little weird settings like that
Right.
you really wanted to do, and they say, yeah, we'll sell 5 of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously such a creative endeavor, but yet it's also a business. So, I mean, I feel like sometimes the business got in the way of your creativity, or...
Well, sometimes, yes, but most of the time it was a matter of, remembering that you had to be basically, you were a business. You had to think about, like, is this something that's going to have enough appeal, or is it going to? Can I find a way to make it reach, or is it, and that sort of stuff. And then the other part of it is that you want to design something that you really like, but you have to remember that you are not designing for yourself.
Right.
That you are designing for a much broader span of people, and so you had to make sure that it remains accessible, and that it's not so esoteric. It's not that only a few people will get it. And we didn't always get that right. We did the series, Amazing Engine series, which was an idea to do basically kind of a universal set of rules, and then do lots of little setting books, because we had all these little setting ideas.
Oh, I see.
And so I did the rules for that in the first couple of setting books, and they were a lot of fun. But they're all very, very, one was was tabloid, where it's basically you're a reporter for a tabloid magazine, and all those crazy reports you read about Bigfoot and all that stuff, they're actually real.
They're real.
So your adventures were to go out and get this stuff.
That would probably sell like 100,000 copies now, just
Yeah.
not then when there was not 100,000 people playing. But now with such a huge audience, I
Or
bet.
when X-Files was popular, that would have sold wonderfully.
But
right?
now you
Yeah.
could probably be like, oh, we're gonna do a 50,000 run and run outs.
So where did that particular idea come from within the company? Was that from the top, from the designers, from?
I think it kind
where-
of came. It kind of came from the designers, and it was kind of like an in-between thing. That we could do this universal system, and then that would be cool. That would let us do a lot of these kind of odd ideas, and then it was a matter of coming up with a list of odd ideas for it, or maybe not so odd, but things that we could do where we were not trying to like push an entire line of 20 or 30 products all around one setting. It was just like, we're going to do this, and if it ever gets an extra module, that'll be an amazing thing, right?
Right.
And
Now you mentioned earlier that a lot of creative people, their first projects are just are garbage when they look back upon them. But on a more positive note, when you look back on your career, is there one thing that you thought, wow, my ideas came together with a great team, and this was just a real, we were in the zone kind of creative moment?
Probably Planescape was
Yeah.
was the single biggest on that. The other one was AD&D, because it was very much a team effort, and we were messing around with the big thing at that point, and having to be very careful.
All right. Hey, you got anything else?
Oh no, I'm just happy to be here with
I was
Mr.
just I've been
Cook.
fanboying this side of the camera all frickin' night.
This was like a big thing, like for the last 12 hours. I was like, oh my God, he wants me to sit
we
down
do a
on
little
this thing?
fanboying around here.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
All right, Larry, why don't you go ahead and take us out
All
of this?
right. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Well, Thank you. It's been fun. I didn't even get to all the weird stories.
Whoa.
Oh, wait,
Pause. Before the credits roll, let's hear a weird story. Go ahead.
One
One weird
One
story.
weird
Okay,
story.
so
Back
one
in the
weird
day.
story. I'll just tease with the title of several and then give you one. There was a time the FBI showed up to investigate possible assassination.
Top
there
secret, maybe?
was Errol Otis falling through the ceiling in my office.
The old building, yeah. What's a lot of these are famous. Is there one we haven't that people might not be familiar with?
Yeah.
That becomes harder because the really good ones get
Get
Widespread coverage, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. We good?
All right.
All right, Larry, take it out one more time.
And hopefully I'll say it right this time.
Please.
We're here at GameHole Con 2022, and we'll be doing more interviews.
Guys, games, and beer.
Gotta wipe my nose.
Hi, I'm Larry with Guys, Games, and Beer, and I'm with...
I am Brian the Baron Koenig, and we are at GameHole Con this afternoon with...
Tom Wham.
So Tom, you were telling us earlier a story about your time with TSR.
Well, it kind of began when my dad taught me how to play Monopoly. I've been designing games ever since. And so I've been a game designer all my life. I wanted to design games, so I got a job at a game company out in Maine where we sold miniatures. It was called Guidon Games.
Okay.
They did Panzerfaust magazine, and but we sold a big box of paint to Gary Gygax in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and it was the guy that shipped them to him didn't do a very good job, and they all arrived broken, and so he sent it back to us. So for years, I painted all my miniatures with rejected Gary Gygax paint.
Well, there you go.
That is not really part of the issue. But
Interesting
that
nonetheless.
led
Yeah.
to my being interested in getting my games published, because while I was there, I wrote a set of miniatures rules called Ironclad for
Okay.
fighting naval battles with Civil War ships on the
Sure.
tabletop. And so that was my first published game, and then I submitted games to game companies and got rejection letters. And I worked as a prison guard. And then I went to SIU in Carbondale, Illinois, and there I was in a game club called the SIU Strategic Game Society. But Tim Kask was one of our members, and he went to Lake Geneva or somewhere and met Gary Gygax and came back with a copy of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And everybody in our club started playing D&D. So everyone in our club had the Hobbit or the Werebear, or I was Nudnik because that was the name of my character and I was a cleric. So, but that was just kind of strange. And then eventually I got divorced and I moved to Colorado, and I got this letter in the mail from Tim Kask. He said, we got this game company in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and we could use a guy like you, because I used to draw cartoons and things like that. So
Okay.
I sent them a cartoon resume, and Gary saw it and said hire him. So
That is a tremendous history. That is super interesting.
that's Wolf the Trained Elephant.
Okay, and that elephant...
First appeared in one of my games called The Gangster Game.
Okay,
But that's
all right.
another story. But anyway, so I applied at TSR, and I arrived there in, I guess it was 77. Was that the year Star Wars first came
Yes.
out? Ah, yes.
Is it?
Because
Yeah.
I went to the Geneva Theater once I was hired by TSR and saw Star Wars 7 times in a row.
Yeah.
As
makes
one
sense.
does,
That makes
yes.
complete sense.
Anyway, I was adopted by Brian Bloom, who was kind of the co-owner of the company along with Gary. But it was a dream job working at TSR. because I was hired to run the Dungeon Hobby Shop for a little while. Then when Ernie Gygax took over the hobby shop, I was bumped upstairs to the art department. I worked with Dave Sutherland and Dave Trampier. If you know Dave Trampier, the guy who did Wormy. So, and of course the board game Titan, which I love a lot. I don't know, I go on. Eventually though, my friendship with Tim Kask led to my putting games in the Dragon magazine. And that's kind of how I kind of became famous, because my first game was Snits, then Snits Smashing, and then the Awful Green Things from Outer Space, so that sort of thing.
That is an impressive pedigree. That's very interesting.
So we're here at GameHole Con, and you've been demoing some games. Tell me about the games you've been demoing.
Well, but we're just working on Tom Wham games because I have kind of given up trying to sell them to game companies, because everybody's doing Kickstarters nowadays.
Yeah.
Nobody, and when you do sell them to game companies, you'd have to take like 15 prototypes. They look at all of them. You never get any of the prototypes back, and they don't take any of them. So, but my last success was about 9 years ago. I took 4 games with me to Gen Con. The nice guy who runs Rio Grande Games, but I've forgotten his name, gave one of them to Zev Schlesinger, who runs Z-Man Games. I don't know if you've ever heard of that company. But anyway, they published one of my games called Feudality, but it was printed in Germany by Lookout Games, the company that does Agricola and all the Uwe Rosenberg games. So the pieces in Feudality are the same as in Caverna, which I think is kind of cool.
So
now, my friend and I have started a company just producing very limited edition runs of games that haven't been published yet, that I thought up through the years, because my apartment is just nothing but walls of games that I've invented and never gotten published. So,
well, if someone wanted to get one of those games, where would they go?
Well, we're on the internet. It's called Tom Wham Games, I think .com. I'm not sure.
And it's pronounced Wham, but spelled W-A-W-H-A-M.
Like
yes.
Wham.
Like Wham, but not Wham.
Wham like bomb.
Right.
Yes.
I'm sort of related to a bunch of Whams from Centralia, Illinois, so.
When you said you've invented games all your life, that I find that super interesting. Where do you find inspiration to come up with a new game?
I don't know. If I like a game, I make a variation of it.
Okay, all right.
Monopoly, of course. A lot of my first games were just different kinds of Monopoly. But when I was young, I had this big collection of little plastic dinosaurs, and I always wanted to make a game called Dinosaur Hunt. So I had this big board, and you move your pieces around the board, and we landed on a space with a dinosaur. You had to fight him, and then you could, well, you captured the dinosaur, took it home with you. Of course, I don't know how you did that.
I work for Fred
And at
Flintstone.
the end, the person who had the best collection of dinosaurs was the winner. So.
Oh, very good. So it's kind of a variations on a theme, and I'm guessing ideas continue to kind of develop and spiral
weird.
from there?
Sometimes things happen. I don't know how I got the idea for the Awful Green Things from Outer Space. I did watch the movie Green Slime, but
okay.
I don't know if that's exactly what happened. We did have ants in our kitchen, but that wasn't Green Things so much as Snits, I think.
Okay, all right.
So I played
I
a
did
game.
a game called Snits, and
Yeah.
then Snits Revenge. And the Snits were all these little creatures that lived on this world. It was a parody of Dungeons and Dragons, all right?
Okay.
And so the gods invented this little silly game where the big creatures were Bolotomuses and the little guys are the Snits, and they lived in the sea. They'd run out, reproduce, run back to the sea, and there were always more of them after they'd reproduced. And then the big guys started saying, "We'll smash the little guys and keep score." And
That's
Very
terrible.
good.
But the next game was called Snit's Revenge because the Snits got pissed and invaded the Bolotomus. They went inside his body and attacked each organ one by one until they found the spark of life and killed the Bolotomus. And in a
That
future
seems
game
Vengeance.
that never got published, there was the Zombolotomus, which had a snit in what would have been the Bolotomus's brain. He has a kind of X for an eye instead of an eyeball with a dot. And then that's the Zombolotomus. So if you ever see a wrinkly Bolotomus walking around with X's for eyes, it's a
I think
Zombolotomus.
I saw one of those the other day. So yesterday I had an opportunity to play one of your games. I did enjoy it. I thought it had some interesting game mechanics and it was fun. But I'm a terrible person at pronouncing names, so it was the finance game.
Oh, that Philithian finance game. I see.
Felician Finance.
Well,
And one of
Did
the
I say
Kind
that?
of a strange story. I worked
Okay.
for quite a while at TSR, and at one point the RPGA, if you know what that is, the Role-Playing Game Association, they used to have a magazine called the Polyhedron, and I was always doing magazines for the Dragon magazine. No, games for the Dragon magazine. So I had this game. It was a little bit based on Avalon Hill Rail Baron, but it was called Space Barons. And what you do is you have these spaceships and you carry cargoes from planet to planet or star system to star system. And it's about an hour long, not even that long, hour, 45-minute, silly game with ridiculous cargoes that you're carrying from one place to another. You know, like a box full of obscenities or things like that. And but it was a fun game, and later on I designed some other games using that star system, and Felith was one of the star systems, but it was one of the cargoes in that first game. But now it's an economic game called Philithian Finance, in which there's 10 different corporations with 10 shares of stock in each corporation. You're manipulating stock and trying to make the prices of the stock go up and collect more than the other players, and you don't know who's got what. It's just always a surprise at the end.
So one of the pleasures of when you come out to a con, sometimes you get to play with the developer. And I found it interesting when you would tell the game group how the names had relations to actual things.
Right. Well, the issue of the Polyhedron that Space Barons was going to be published in, I took all the cargoes in the game from that issue of the Polyhedron. So there were references to a ball of lint from underneath Jean Raby's desk. If you know who Jean Raby is, she used to be head of the RPGA. She writes books now. So,
Okay. Yeah, I mean that was really interesting. In your games, in your game designs, do you like to hide Easter egg ideas like that?
Oh, sometimes. I just try to put silly, strange things in because I hate being serious. I mean, every Tom Mom game is, meant to be laughed at. There's nothing serious in them.
Okay. If you had to choose one game of all of your favorite all-time game of all the ones you've invented, what would it be?
Well,
And is it still available?
Yes, because it's still in print.
Oh, very good.
It's the Awful Green Things from Outer Space.
Okay, there we go.
And I first did it for the Dragon magazine, and then TSR produced, several thousand copies and sold them. When TSR finally stopped selling the game, Steve Jackson contacted me and said, "Do I have the rights?" And I said, "Yeah." So he published an edition, and then he published another edition, and then another edition. So ever since, I think he took over in 1980, there's always been a copy, some version of Awful Green Things from Outer Space in print. And the sad part is it's a two-player game. So since about 1984, I've been working on a game sequel to the Awful Green Things, and we played it at GaryCon this year, so hopefully that'll be coming out in a bit. Multiplayer instead of just two-player.
Yeah, that's that. can definitely be a thing. No number of players in a game.
Yeah.
Yes.
I prefer multiplayers. 3 or 4 is really best for a game because it goes faster. And with 2 players, it's just kind of a duel.
Right. Yeah. So many more facets. So many more opportunities for
You play
backstabbing.
one person against another.
when you have 3 or 4 people at
Yeah,
the table.
well, I don't like Avalon Hill Diplomacy. If you've ever played that game,
I have played Diplomacy.
it's all backstabbing.
Yeah.
But you have to lie and cheat
Yeah.
all the way and convince everybody that you're not going to stab them in the back.
No, we're fine.
Oh,
Everything's fine. We're doing fine. How are you?
here.
Any other things that you would like to express to our viewers, or anything else you'd like to add that we haven't touched on yet?
I don't know.
Well,
I
how
still
about-
live in Lake Geneva.
All right.
After I left TSR, I got a job at the Lake Geneva Library and worked there. So,
All right.
but I stayed in Lake Geneva and gamed with all of my friends. Still hang out with Ernie Gygax all the time. So,
So
Very
you
good.
been to like Gary Con then and hung out there? And-
oh yes. Well, Gary Con was the first Gary Con was Gary's funeral, because at his funeral there was nothing there but gamers. So we all were there with no games to play. So we played a bunch of games in his honor, and that was Gary Con 1. So, and it's just grown ever since. It's been a wonderful thing.
So one more time then, your website where we can find you and your work.
Well, just Tom Wham Games. I think that Google
I,
finds
I,
it.
I did want to touch on
Oh, yeah,
that.
sorry, go
You
ahead.
both create the games and do the art.
Right. Well, I did some art for the Monster Manual back when I worked with Trampier and Sutherland. It was sort of a competition to see who could get the most pictures into the first Monster Manual. And Dave Sutherland and Dave Trampier kind of took it really to heart and tried to outpace each other. So they each contributed 3/4 of the book, and I contributed 1/4. So
So when it comes to
my only famous monster in that book is the Beholder. So Tom Wham drew the Beholder.
that's a big one. So in
Yeah, there's one coming out from Wizards of the Coast in miniature in a big box of 10. You have to buy the whole box, and I'm buying the whole box just to get my Beholder.
So in creative efforts, do you prefer to do art or do like the design of games?
Both. But,
Complete control.
you know,
Well, I mean,
I draw silly cartoons and then work them into my game. So
Okay. It's well, because sometimes there are, and you may like to do something like I code computers, right? And there's certain elements I like to do, and there's others I just have to do because it won't work if I don't do the have to do's.
Yeah, yeah.
And so sometimes people like to do art, sometimes people don't, and sounds like you fall in the middle.
I hope so. Well, I was pretty good at writing things in high school, and I didn't flunk English when I was in college. So, and I learned how to write game rules, and that's kind of like writing books. And actually, I have written several books. So, I used to live with Rose Estes, who wrote the Pick Your Own Path books.
Oh,
And,
the choose your own adventure style?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And then later on, she started writing some of the Greyhawk adventures after Gary got bumped from TSR. And but Rose was always involved with more than she could handle, and since I could write, she'd give me half of the book to write, and then she'd get the credit. I'd get the rent paid because she'd shared the money with me because we lived together, So it worked out. And I actually did a couple of books on my own. I did my favorite book it was a choose your own adventure that got published, and then there was a bit of The Incomplete Enchanter by L. Sprague de Camp and Fletcher Pratt, if you know who I'm talking about.
I don't, but I'm terrible at
Okay,
names.
well, anyway, it's called, I can't remember the Enchanter Reborn or something like that. It's a collection of stories of other people writing more of the incomplete Enchanter stories, and one of mine is in that. So write books, write rules, draw art. I was really bad at deadlines, which is why I never became a serious cartoonist like I should have.
What's a
I'm
deadline?
jealous of Jolly Blackburn. He gets an issue of his comic book out every month through Kenzer and Company. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Hey, by the way, is it on your website? Is that finance game on there? Because I think I'm going to pick up copies.
Yeah, we did them through Game Crafters here in Madison.
Oh, sure.
You know who they are?
Yep.
You pay them enough money, and they'll produce a really nice-looking board game for you.
Well, yeah, I have produced one game, and it was on Game Crafter. Yes.
Right. Well, I kind of view them as a way to submit a good-looking prototype to a game company. But
That's kind of what they originally thought, I think, was their role, but...
my buddy Dave Conant, who has worked for years at TSR,
Yeah.
and he would lay out games for them, rules and
Yeah.
modules and all sorts of things. But Dave would always come to conventions with me and help me play my games, and he'd run Whamathons with me, which is where people just come play anything I've got that they feel like playing. And that's kind of what we're doing here.
So, are
So
they...
Dave decided to make a company, and
Yeah.
that's how it happened. I didn't have much to do with it.
So are the games are available on the website, but can you go to Game Crafter and look you up from Game Crafter?
No, we don't sell them through Game Crafter.
Oh,
We
okay.
We get them printed. Sometimes the first one people ordered actually through Game Crafter. It's kind of like a Kickstarter, but not really. You pay the price of the game, then you commit your money, and then when they print it, you get a copy. But the more people order it, the lower the price gets.
All right. Well, so that's Tom Wham Games.
Tom Wham.
Wham.
I'm used to being Wham.
Wham.
You know, when I joined the Navy, my first chief called me Whammy. So.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure.
You can't hear a word we're saying. He's looking to see if we're doing right.
No, we're doing great. But this has been an absolute pleasure. Do you have anything else, Brian?
I'm all set.
All right. Well,
I'm sure I didn't talk enough about some of the things I should have talked about. Oh, well. Oh, Dave Trampier married my sister, so I'm his brother-in-law, except he passed away. Oh, well.
That cheery note. we're going to wrap up this segment at GameHole Con, and we will see you with more interviews.